Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The man leading the investigation into Donald Trump's presidential campaign and Russia has taken the first step towards possible criminal charges. Calling together a citizens' body known as a grand jury will give Special Counsel Robert Mueller more legal powers. For more now, let's go to Washington and talk to our correspondent, Cordelia Lynch. Good to see you as ever, Cordelia. Never a quiet moment coming from your neck of the woods. Should President Trump be worried?
Well, it does mean that the inquiry is gaining intensity, but it's not unusual to see this, a prosecutor to impanel a grand jury like this, and Robert Mueller is taking his role very seriously. It means now that they'll be able to subpoena witnesses. I understand that that has already taken place in connection with the Trump Tower meeting between Donald Trump Jr. and a Russian lawyer who reportedly offered to dish dirt on Hillary Clinton. But I think Donald Trump has been very clear about his frustrations concerning this probe. He considers it a hoax, as he told his faithful last night at a rally in West Virginia. Take a listen.
We know there are powerful forces in Washington who want to stop us, but we won't let them. The Russia story is a total fabrication. It's just an excuse for the greatest loss in the history of American politics. That's all it is.
I think it's important to say, Gamal, that a grand jury had already been appointed by the FBI. This is a new one. It gives Robert Mueller a chance to aggressively pursue evidence, and the job of the grand jury is to consider whether criminal charges can be brought. But this is not confirmation that they will. None of us, of course, know that, and the president's own lawyer has said that he welcomes something that could expedite a resolution to this inquiry and bring it to a close as swiftly as possible. The Trump administration are very keen indeed to move on. Now, the fact we even know that this grand jury exists is because of yet more leaking, which is proving very problematic and frustrating for the White House. In the next few hours, we will hear from the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who we expect to lay out a plan of how to stop some of this leaking. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is preparing for a 17-day holiday away from Washington, but I'm sure Russia will still be firmly on his mind.
Cordelia, many thanks indeed. OK, we're going to take you straight to Washington, where the Attorney General Jeff Sessions has given an update on the grand jury that's been assembled as part of the investigation into Russian links to the Trump campaign.
Threat task force that was established in 2011. This task force has an important role to play, and one we are taking seriously. Progress has been made, and we intend to reach new levels of effectiveness. First, let me say that I strongly agree with the President and condemn in the strongest terms the staggering number of leaks undermining the ability of our government to protect this country. Just yesterday, we saw reports in the media about conversations the President had with foreign leaders. No one is entitled to surreptitiously fight to advance battles in the media by revealing sensitive government information. No government can be effective when its leaders cannot discuss sensitive matters in confidence or talk freely in confidence with foreign leaders. We're here today to talk about the dramatic growth in the number of unauthorized disclosures of classified national security information in the past several months. This includes leaks to both the media and, in some cases, even unauthorized disclosures to our foreign adversaries. Referrals for investigations of classified leaks to the Department of Justice from our intelligence agencies have exploded. In the first 6 months of this administration, the Department of Justice has already received nearly as many criminal referrals involving unauthorized disclosures of classified information as we received in the previous 3 years combined. Classified information, by definition, is information that, if disclosed, would do harm to national security. As Director Coates will discuss, leaks are incredibly damaging to our intelligence mission and capabilities. Simply put, these leaks hurt our country. All of us in government can do better. The first requirement is for discipline within all our agencies of the government. To prevent these leaks, every agency and Congress has to do better. We are taking a stand. This culture of leaking must stop. Furthering this goal today, we are here to announce some steps being taken and underway by the National Insider Threat Task Force to ensure the government's first priority to protect this country and her citizens is not undermined by the very people who've been entrusted to protect it. While the Department of Justice does not discuss ongoing investigations or confirm specific matters, it is important for the American people and those who might be thinking about leaking classified or sensitive information to know that criminals who would illegally use their access to our most sensitive information to endanger our national security are, in fact, being investigated and will be prosecuted. Since January, the Department has more than tripled the number of active leak investigations compared to the number pending at the end of the last administration. And we've already charged 4 people with unlawfully disclosing classified material or with concealing contacts with federal officers. Soon after I arrived here in February, I initiated a review of our leak investigations and prosecutions. I reviewed how these cases were being referred and handled and was concerned with what I found. Too few referrals, too few investigations with the sufficient resources dedicated to them. I concluded the unprecedented rise in leaks required an increase of additional support for more investigations and to speed up existing investigations. Our system here relies on the intelligence community making a determination of whether classified material has been improperly handled or released and then sending referrals to us at the Department of Justice. This means it's vital for the intelligence community to know that the Department of Justice is committed to investigating and prosecuting these referrals. And when few investigations take place, criminal leaks may occur more often, and a culture of leaking can take hold. So today, I have this message for our friends in the intelligence community. The Department of Justice is open for business, and I have this warning for would-be leakers: don't do it. For the past several months, we've already made changes and are seriously ramping up our efforts. First, I directed my fine deputy, Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, whose district in Maryland encompasses NSA headquarters and who has personally led investigations of this kind, and the investigator, FBI Director Christopher Wray, to oversee all classified leak investigations, actively monitor the progress of each and every case. Secondly, I directed the National Security Division of the Department of Justice and our U.S. attorneys to prioritize cases involving unauthorized disclosures. The Department will not hesitate to bring lawful and appropriate criminal charges against those who would abuse the public trust. Third, as I have said, we tripled the number of active leak investigations. In response, the FBI has increased resources devoted to leak cases and created a new counterintelligence unit to manage these cases. Simultaneously, this department is reviewing policies that impact leak investigations. And I've listened to our career investigators, FBI agents and others, and our prosecutors about how to most successfully investigate and prosecute these matters. At their suggestion, One of the things we are doing is reviewing policies affecting media subpoenas. We respect the important role that the press plays and will give them respect, but it is not unlimited. They cannot place lives at risk with impunity. We must balance the press's role with protecting our national security and the lives of those who serve in the intelligence community, the armed forces, and all law-abiding Americans. Finally, here is what I want to tell every American today. This nation must end this culture of leaks. We will investigate and seek to bring criminals to justice. We will not allow rogue anonymous sources with security clearances to sell out our country. These cases to investigate and prosecute are never easy, but cases will be made and leakers will be held accountable. All of us in government and in every agency in Congress must do better. The first requirement is personal discipline. Education and repetition within our departments and agencies will make a difference. Prevention is what is required. An investigation of a leak is too late, really. The damage is done. Thank you all, and I would now recognize our Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coates.
Well, as the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, speaking there, let's get some reaction to this with our US correspondent, Cordelia Lynch. Good to see you once again, Cordelia. So the message to would-be leakers is don't do it.
Absolutely stern words and warning from Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, a man who Donald Trump has recently described as beleaguered and weak. We understand that he has come under some pressure from the president himself to clamp down on this leaking, which has been significant in recent days. It's only yesterday, of course, that we heard the leaked transcript of the president's calls with the leaders of Mexico and Australia. And it's important to say that there is some bipartisan support for this. There's concerns on both sides of the political aisle that the level of leaking could threaten national security, that it could also impede critical foreign policy. So this is Jeff Sessions' attempt to try and set out a plan for how to tackle it, and it seems that there's already work underway. He made clear there that there have already been 4 people charged. That's something we didn't know before, so I think it just signifies the level of severity that the White House are taking with this and how deep their concerns are. We've seen a lot of chaos and problems internally within the White House recently, and with a new Chief of Staff, General Kelly, in place, they are trying to instill more discipline. He even raised the spectre of subpoenas for media there, forcing them to come forward. That, of course, would be legally challenged, but it is instrumental of how fraught the situation is here.
And Cordelia, let's talk about that story that's not going away anytime soon. The investigation into links between Russia and the President Trump's campaign. We understand that this grand jury has now been set up. So should President Trump be worried?
Well, he will certainly be frustrated at this spotlight remaining on the Russia investigation, something that only last night he described as a hoax. He doesn't feel that there was any kind of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, and he's frustrated by how much talk there is of it here in Washington and elsewhere as well. It does raise the possibility that he may wish for Robert Mueller, the special counsel who has convened this grand jury, could be removed in some way. Now, that is not Donald Trump's, it's not within his power to get rid of him, but the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, could. I spoke to Senator Lindsey Graham a little earlier about, what the significance of that is. Here's what he had to say.
Well, under our law, the president can't fire the special counsel. The only person who can fire the special counsel would be the Attorney General. The reason I've introduced this legislation is to let the American people know we'll have a check and balance, that there will be judicial review if somebody did try to fire Mueller. The president can't do it, but the Attorney General or their designee might have have the ability to do it? Well, they do. I don't see any evidence they're going to do that. As a matter of fact, I think it'd be incredibly foolish to fire Mueller without cause. It would create holy hell in America. I just don't see that happening, but checks and balances are good. At the same time, Mueller needs to run a professional investigation. And if we read excerpts from the grand jury hearings and testimony in the paper every day, then he needs to be held accountable.
Do you have faith that this is and will be a fair investigation?
Yeah, Bob Mueller has a great reputation. We're going to make sure he goes forward fairly, and but he'll be held accountable by the way he conducts it. The president can, he can say anything he wants to about the political nature of this. This is not a witch hunt. There's real evidence that Russia interfered in our election. No evidence of collusion yet between the Trump team and the Russians, but we're going to keep looking. When it's all said and done, I want America to know the damage that Russia did to our democracy and hold people account who worked with them if they did it all. No evidence of collusion, but we're going to keep looking, and we're a nation of laws here, just like you. And our friends in Great Britain, there's nobody above the law in Great Britain, and there's nobody above the law in America.
You've seen the president's comments in West Virginia. Are you concerned that he continues to call this a hoax?
Well, all I can say is not. There's real solid evidence that the Russians interfered, no evidence of collusion yet. The bottom line is the attack Ken Starr on the Democratic side when he was investigating Clinton. Certain politics is expected, I guess, but you can go too far. Going too far would be trying to interfere with the investigation.
So the Russia investigation has stepped up a gear, so has concerns about further leaking. But the White House has made clear today through Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, that they are ramping up efforts, and their message to leakers: don't do it.
Cordelia, thank you.
Donald Trump is coming under increasing pressure over allegations that members of his campaign team colluded with Russia in last year's US presidential election. The special prosecutor investigating the claims has convened a grand jury, which is a first step to bringing possible criminal charges. The president has always denied the allegations, telling supporters last night they're a total fabrication. Our North America editor, John Sopel, has more.
Donald Trump is never happier than when he's out of Washington. This is where he belongs. An adoring crowd in West Virginia, the problems of Russia, collusion, special counsels and grand juries, a long way from these country roads.
The Russia story is a total fabrication. It's just an excuse for the greatest loss in the history of American politics. That's all it is.
He didn't mention the special counsel by name, but had him in his sights when he said this.
I just hope the final determination is a truly honest one.
A grand jury is made up of members of the public meeting behind closed doors to consider the evidence that's been gathered. They can force people to testify or to hand over evidence. They'll decide whether the material is strong enough to proceed to a criminal trial. But crucially, they don't decide if a potential defendant is innocent or guilty. That's done by a conventional jury. Of course, it may be that the grand jury meeting at this courthouse will come to the conclusion that the evidence doesn't add up to much and there's no need for further action. But the fact that a grand jury has been called is a sign that this investigation is intensifying and will last a good deal longer yet. And the other worry for the Trump entourage is that the scope of the inquiry will spread as well. That's a source of fury. Another is the endless damaging and revealing leaks from within the administration. And today the Attorney General announced a new crackdown.
This nation must end this culture of leaks. We will investigate and seek to bring criminals to justice. We will not allow rogue anonymous sources with security clearances to sell out our country.
The President today visited FEMA, the Federal Emergency Centre, to look at plans for dealing with hurricanes. It's hurricane season. And with this grand jury, one could soon be barrelling towards Donald Trump. John Sopel, BBC News, Washington.
As President Trump heads to his golf resort in New Jersey tonight for a 17-day holiday, there will be no break for the special prosecutor investigating whether his campaign colluded with Russia during the election campaign. Instead, Robert Mueller has upped the pressure using a grand jury as part of the inquiry. And the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, is busy too, launching a crackdown on the disclosure of classified material, a week after the president accused him of being very weak on leakers. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Rugman reports from Washington.
From day one, when he was sworn in here at the Capitol, from his false claim that over 1 million people attended his inauguration here on the Mall, this is a president who ducks and weaves when it comes to the truth. Now, at this federal courthouse right across the street, a grand jury is seeking the whole truth, nothing but the truth, about potentially the biggest lie of all. That Mr. Trump's campaign is covering up its alleged collusion with the Kremlin to help get the president elected. Calling together a grand jury of members of the public allows prosecutors to question witnesses under oath, and for that jury to consider whether there is enough evidence for a criminal trial at a later date. And given that this investigation has no deadline, it could hang over the Trump presidency for many months to come. In West Virginia last night, you got no sense of the president's approval rating, having hit a record low of 33%. Instead, a raucous country welcome, and Mr. Trump coming out swinging at the allegations against him.
The Russia story is a total fabrication. It's just an excuse for the greatest loss in the history of American politics. That's all it is. Most people know there were no Russians in our campaign. There never were. We didn't win because of Russia. We won because of you. That I can tell you.
Incredible. On Monday, Mr. Trump indulged in some fabrication himself.
Even the president of Mexico called me. They said their southern border, very few people are coming because they know they're not going to get through our border.
But there was no such phone call, nor was it true that the head of the Boy Scouts had called him to say that Trump's was the greatest speech the short-trousered brigade had ever heard.
A scout is trustworthy.
Specifically said that he received a phone call from the president of Mexico.
They were actually direct. They were direct conversations, not actual phone calls.
So he lied. He didn't receive.
I wouldn't say it was a lie. It was. That's pretty bold accusation. It's a.
According to a New York Times tally, Mr. Trump has told over 100 lies in his first 6 months. Now it seems he encouraged the Mexican leader to be a little fraudulento as well. I have to have Mexico pay for the wall. I have to. I've been talking about it for a 2-year period, he told President Peña Nieto in January. And when the Mexican leader said he wouldn't pay, you cannot say that to the press. The press is going to go with that, and I cannot live with that. It was a classified conversation from inside a White House, both leaking and heavily leaked against. Trump's Attorney General revealing today that he'd tripled the number of leak investigations.
We are taking a stand. This culture of leaking must stop.
Jeff Sessions taking no questions today, perhaps because the president has accused him of weakness in bringing criminal charges against leakers before. As Washington leaves Washington, the Senate now on holiday, with Mr. Trump's unmet pledges on healthcare and tax reform looking decidedly lame. The Senate's arguably biggest act, new sanctions on Russia, ironically something the president fought against.
Are there any Russians here tonight? Any Russians?
After last night's swinging speech, time for his golf swing. Over 2 weeks vacation, despite having told voters last year that he wouldn't have time for the game. And if Mr. Trump can't tell the truth about that, then Americans want to know what else will the grand jury discover here, as they scour the evidence in an investigation which is only growing. So the president heads off for 17 days at his private golf club in New Jersey. The Secret Service will protect him there by flying a drone above him 300 feet up, partly to avoid any invasion of privacy. And he ends his first 6 months with remarkably little to show for them. A deadlocked Congress only coming together against him by imposing sanctions on Russia for alleged election interference. Mr. Trump sacked his chief of staff last week, his director of communications this week, But there are new bills in the Senate pipeline to make it much harder for the president to sack Robert Mueller, the special counsel who has convened the grand jury to investigate. The grand jury meeting in the same building where Bill Clinton's relationship with an intern was investigated almost 20 years ago. Mr. Trump calls all this a witch hunt against him, but if so, there is no doubt that witch hunt is here to stay.
Jonathan Rugman in Washington. Well, joining me now from Nashville, Tennessee, is the Republican strategist Scottie Nell Hughes, and from Los Angeles, Professor Jessica Levinson from Loyola Law School. Professor, can you tell us what the real significance of the grand jury is? There's a temptation to think about movies and think this means a lawsuit is not far away. I mean, what does it actually signify?
Well, it means that Robert Mueller is in the process of gathering evidence. It does not mean that there will absolutely be a criminal indictment, but it does mean that the case is perhaps broadening because there's another grand jury that's investigating Michael Flynn. So we've now broadened the case potentially. This is a grand jury that's in the District of Columbia, and it may be that we're looking at additional officials from the District of Columbia, and it means that there's at least a criminal predicate. It means that a prosecutor thinks that there's enough evidence to present to the grand jury to say, are you willing to find that there is enough evidence here for a criminal indictment? So again, it means the case is progressing. It doesn't mean that there absolutely were criminal violations. It doesn't mean that there will absolutely be an indictment. It means that we're well past the point of this being a fishing expedition. There are significant laws in place that say you cannot use a grand jury as a fishing expedition, and it means that there's something real there and we're progressing.
Scottie Nell Hughes, if people in the Trump campaign have done enough to be indicted, do you agree they should face the full force of the law?
Absolutely, but the question there, have they done enough to be indicted? We have yet to see zero proof being produced to the American public that's actually showing tangible evidence of any sort of wrongdoing by anyone with the Trump campaign in collusion with the Russian government. And I like the word broadening. They are broadening this investigation, and I hope that just means that they haven't found anything. It's not obvious that there were any wrongdoing done. So if there was anything, if there is any evidence, Mueller has been known, his track record has been a swift, quick action. And I guess they're going to continue to expand and expand. The question is, how far are they going to continue to expand? That makes it look more like a fishing expedition than necessarily trying to find out the facts. It looks like truly what Donald Trump says it is, a witch hunt.
Jessica Levinson, you're shaking your head.
That's simply... Yeah, so that's simply not the case. First of all, there's rules in place, there's laws in place that say you can't just broaden in and make it a fishing expedition. Second, it's really important for viewers to understand grand juries operate in secret. The only reason we know about this at all is because grand juries have the power of the law to ask people to produce documents and to have witnesses testify under oath. That's the only reason that we even know this is happening. By definition, the Constitution dictates that grand juries operate in secret. So therefore, it is not appropriate for the American public to be privy to the evidence. This is part of a very concerted effort. It's part of the criminal justice system. This is not happening in the court of public opinion. It's happening in the criminal justice system where it belongs.
Scottie Nell Hughes, I mean, doesn't the
Listen,
president
hold on,
look
I object to that. Well, that's it. That's the whole thing. I object to you saying that it's not being held in the court of public opinion. Absolutely. Hence why we're talking about it. Because the whole idea is the fact, you know, in America we have this thing called innocent until proven guilty. But just by the fact that they're calling a grand jury, you're already saying majority of people in the news business today are saying that the Trump campaign was guilty. And we have yet, once again, in the last times that we have seen grand juries been called on somebody like a president, we've seen tangible evidence. There was a blue dress. There were missing emails. At this case, the American people have yet to be produced any sort of actual evidence to back up these claims. And this is why I think this is just noise to distract from the good things the president has done, like 209,000 jobs that were added on. 1 million jobs in the last 6 months that President Trump has been in office. 209. The things that actually matter to mainstream America,
to claim credit
this
for
is
those.
All noise to cover up from it.
Jobs are created by private businesses.
Absolutely. Well, that's the thing. And when you actually cut the strings, like the Affordable Health Care Act, when you actually unbound business from the regulation that the last administration put towards them, then yes, you do have growth in business and you have lower unemployment rate, consumer confidence at a 16-year high. But unfortunately, those sorts of things are not breaking through on the noise of Russia.
Which law do you think has been his best so far? that he's managed to get through Congress?
Well, you know, my thing is, why don't you take that up with Congress? We do have something called 3 separate but equal branches in our United States government. It's how we set it up. So take that up with the legislative branch and the legislators who, for some reason, cannot seem to get along, considering the Republicans were the reason why there were repeal and replace, but that was 3 Republicans like John McCain who refused to go along with what their party had pushed through. So take that up with the legislative branch. I'm here to defend President Trump and his wonderful policies that are working for America.
Professor Levinson, what do you think this says about the institution of the presidency?
Well, first of all, I would just point out that we're talking about the grand jury, and then all of a sudden we're talking about employment numbers. So to the extent that we want to not try and distract and stay on topic, the topic is the grand jury. There have absolutely been grand juries that have not found indictments. I want to be very clear, and I said this explicitly, the fact that you impanel a grand jury does not mean that an indictment is coming. It means that an investigation is continuing. It means that a secret investigation is continuing, as the Constitution dictates that it should. There was a criminal jury impaneled with respect to the Hillary Clinton email situation, and that grand jury did not find an indictment. So we have plenty of situations where an indictment may not be coming. What we have is the criminal justice system working exactly as it should. The American people, again, are not entitled to jump into that grand jury room and try and play members of the grand jury or prosecutor. This is for professionals to play out. And the idea that President Trump would call this a total fabrication, I think, is part of what he's done as candidate Trump and President Trump, which is try and undermine not only the judiciary, but the criminal justice system, and at times we're increasingly see the legislative branch.
We must leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed, Jessica Levinson and Scotty Noel Hughes.
Now, with pressure building all around him, President Trump must have left Washington tonight for a 17-day golfing holiday with some relief, leaving behind him an intensifying investigation into Russia's role in his election. Overnight, he condemned the latest development, the formation of a grand jury, and called the allegations of collusion between his campaign and Moscow a fake story. But while the president is away, the digging goes on.
Even as he escapes what he calls the Washington swamp, the questions keep coming. Are you firing Robert Mueller, they yell.
Mr. President, are you considering firing Robert Mueller? Donald J. Trump!
The president is clearly unhappy with the direction of the special investigation, as he told loyal fans last night.
The Russia story is a total fabrication. It's just an excuse for the greatest loss in the history of American politics. That's all it is.
But Robert Mueller, the man Trump hoped would quickly dismiss allegations of Russian collusion, has instead aggressively expanded the probe, setting up the grand jury to look into a series of claims. Did the Trump team encourage Russian contacts to release damaging material on Hillary Clinton? Did the president know about the meeting between his family members and a Russian lawyer? And did the president obstruct justice when he fired FBI Chief James Comey, as he was looking at possible Russian interference? Although attention has focused on those closest to Donald Trump, particularly his son and son-in-law, a former acting attorney general told me the substance is about business deals.
We know objectively that there are previous financial relationships between Trump, his family, and various Russian investors, purchasers of apartments, things along those lines. And so if there's a question of collusion where that's the consideration or that's the underlying issue, it would make sense to look into it.
It's 20 years since the Clinton administration was embroiled in a grand jury investigation, but there could be lessons for this president.
Bill Clinton was pretty good at basically focusing on his day job and not letting the investigation get his presidency off track. That's exactly what President Trump's got to do, have a laser-like focus on delivering for the American people.
He didn't get what he wanted, but can President Trump now resist the urge to lash out and stop the tweeting?
So, Julia, the president might be out of town, but a period of silence from him rather unlikely, many would think.
I think that even his friends and his closest advisors would like to know, if there is a way of stopping him talking, just what it is. It frankly isn't going to happen, and there are a few harsh truths to look at. This investigation that he's so opposed to has been relatively watertight if you compare it to his own administration that's leaked like a sieve. We didn't even know the grand jury was actually sitting until yesterday. Apparently it's been around for at least 2 weeks. But on the other side, we have Donald Trump, who just can't keep quiet. And the truth is that it's his outbursts that really keep this centre and forward. Last night he told those supporters who came to his rally in West Virginia that it was all fabricated. It was cheating them of their future, he said. But if you look at the central claim that's been investigated, it's whether a foreign power interfered with American democracy. Now, if he continues to say that this should be dismissed, that this is not a serious investigation, that they should get over it as quickly as possible, people are going to ask quite legitimately, what is he trying to hide? And if he tries to get rid of the special prosecutor, Robert Mueller, then there are going to be senators here in Washington who are determined to stop him. They've introduced 2 bills to that very effect.
Juliet, thank you.